AI can make you a bad thinker really fast.
Is a step in the wrong direction is better than no step in any direction.
Amen.
Is I checked my brain at the door.
That your brain skips steps sometimes. And that, unchecked, is dangerous. Have either of you been slapped in the face by AI?
Hey, everybody. I'm Kosta. I'm here with Justin and Tim. This is our weekly Everwise podcast where we talk about the struggles, trials, tribulations, and how to amplify your learning using AI.
Welcome, everybody. Looking forward to this conversation today, guys. We thought we'd try something different, right? Today, we're going to tackle a couple of questions that we know are out there that viewers are asking. And I think we're going to have some really good discussion around this because this is behind the scenes stuff that we talk about on a pretty frequent basis. So let me throw it out there. First question, open conversation. How do I use AI as a tool to test my judgment without letting it become a replacement for my thinking?
I think AI can make you a bad thinker really fast. And that's the scary thing. But on the flip end, it can also amplify you and who you are. So I think there's no replacing personal growth and building yourself up. And I think that's the crux of it, really. And what's happening now is people are outsourcing their thinking to AI. I think that's a bad idea because you don't just walk away not knowing, you actually walk away worse. I think it's been proven in studies. I can't remember what study you liked at MIT where people are using AI to like write their essays and outsource their thinking, and they effectively get dumber.
Yes.
Yeah. You guys, can I ask you a
MIT.
question, Tim?
Sure.
Do you outsource your thinking to AI? Do you like on my part, I never let AI pick. And in the instances in which I have, it works out terribly. Right. And I typically end up now picking a mentor or two. You guys know this. I pick a mentor or two. I synthesize their information and I apply it to what I'm building. And I do the building and I take the judgment away. You know, what do you guys do to ensure that you're walking away better?
So I am not 100% perfect. Sometimes I let AI do some thinking that I don't care too much about, things that maybe small potato type things that I don't really want to think about or I don't really care too much about. But I think it's kind of interesting. The way I think about it is I will usually get AI to critique I usually start from something. I don't even remember the last time I asked any AI to give me something with no starting spot, right? Like I need to look at this data and I need a summary of this data. I have not done anything like that in a very long time. I always start from something and ask AI to analyze it or to poke holes in it or like to look at it and tell me what's going on that I might be missing. And even what I've started doing now is I'll prime it with what I think is happening or what my experience has told me is probably happening, something like that, just to get a starting spot. But I'll make sure that it's in the instructions that it's like get rid of everything I say if it's wrong or if it's bad or if it's, irrelevant or something like that. Sure.
So you said, you know, if it's advice sounds dumb or wrong or whatever it is, how do you know the advice sounds dumb because AI is wrong? Or how do you know if the advice sounds dumb because you're like a few steps behind and you don't really know because you've outsourced your thinking already?
So it's not necessarily the AI that I was talking about there. I was just kind of giving I give it a little bit of freedom to tell me that I'm dumb if I'm saying something. Like if I give it some data and I say, I want to know this from this data, if that's a stupid thing and it doesn't matter and it's irrelevant, it'll just tell me. I don't think that that's helpful because of X, Y, and Z or these couple of reasons, right? I'm thinking of the classic, if you give it any kind of AI an Excel sheet with data in it and ask it to give you a summary, it's going to give you the most basic, average summary of that data that you could probably figure out by just opening it and looking at it with your own eyes. Like, it's sometimes it'll throw in some cool facts there, or like, things or outliers or something like that. Like, sometimes it'll give you something extra, save you minutes on the analysis. But at the same token, you walk away with zero knowledge. You just have the output of that, and you don't even know if it's right or not, because you give any LLM like 30,000 lines of a table, and it'll probably make some shit up, because that's a lot of tokens to go into analyzing all of that. So I think it was just kind of a misunderstanding. I gave it the kind of like go ahead to tell me that I am going down the wrong path just with my questions. And I think that's kind of like where I was getting, is like, I always start with something, even if it's wrong, even if it's bad or stupid, or I don't understand it or something like that. I always give it something as a start. Like, I give some kind of starting off spot and then adjust it from there. I almost never get it to start things for me, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Matt?
I have so many questions. The first one that pops into my head is, I suppose, the one that Justin always talks about, which is, how do you know where to start?
Well, my opinion on that, I think I mentioned this in the last one, but my opinion on that is a step in the wrong direction is better than no step in any direction.
Amen.
No step, right?
And so I don't know where to start. Most of the times I don't. And most of the times I get it wrong, because there's, picture it on a map, you got 360 degrees. And if you're trying to go one direction, you have no idea which one. You've got, 359 chances of being wrong. But a bunch of them are going at least the right, like, cardinal direction, right? Like, you got a 25% chance to just randomly go the right direction, or like just the right, chunk of the right direction. I think most people can probably figure out, using that analogy, right? Like, you're on a map, you have no idea where you want to go, but you need to get somewhere, and you just pick, a direction. I think most people have the basic kind of understanding or intelligence or common sense to at least point themselves in the right cardinal direction. Like, they have like the goalposts are pretty wide. Like, they don't have the narrow perfect step in that direction, but they do have, like, I know this direction I know it's somewhere in this direction. I don't know where, like, I can't tell you specifically where it is, but I know it's in this direction, right? And I think that's just, you use basic understanding to get in that direction. And with that, your starting step, even though it might not be the perfect next starting step, at least it's a step, and you get more visibility, and you get more knowledge, and you get more understanding the further you go down. And I'll use this example of I think I mentioned it last week, my green screen project I'm doing. There are a lot of ways that you can do that, and a lot of ways you can color correct and mask, and like, there's like, it is legitimately like a choose your own adventure book, where, like, 10 out of the 400 paths lead to a really good looking final product, and most of them lead to something that looks like garbage that somebody came up with, like, on a 45-year-old laptop with crazy outdated technology. As you take steps towards any of those, like, as you go down those paths, you start gaining understanding, especially if you're challenging yourself and you're trying to intake that information. You're not just trying to get it to do it for you. You start understanding what these different tools mean, and what the effects they have, and you start to understand, and sometimes AI can help you point to this, where you start to slowly realize that you're going the wrong direction, or you're not on the right path, right? That's only, like, you can only really tell that, like, as you start getting that understanding, and then you take all the understanding you've built in that path, and you go back to a previous, like, jumping off point, and you use that on this new path, and all of a sudden you can take steps faster. You can kind of make leaps and bounds, because you have that understanding. And sometimes you hit a dead end there too, and then you got to go back and keep going. And the thing that I enjoy, and the thing that I think makes this really powerful, is if AI just gives you the perfect path the first time, you only have that vision, and if anything changes or goes wrong, you don't have the flexibility or kind of the depth of knowledge to understand what's happening and to be able to problem solve or adjust it or, impact it. So that's kind of my my process, I guess.
There was just something that kind of stood out to me in what you were stating there, and I think it's applicable to our audience base, being self-learners and autodidacts. And I think that sometimes loving to learn can lead you in the opposite way that you actually want to go. Sometimes you made a statement earlier and you said, how did you frame it? You can intend to go one way and you go the opposite way. And it was almost like, Kosta, you say it all the time, words have power. And when I heard you say that, I was almost like framing, but I had this image of, I'm like, if I'm a voyageur in like 1750 in the Ohio background, like territory area, is it necessarily the bad thing that I go in the opposite direction from where I originally intended to, right? Because eventually I'm probably still going to work my way out there. I just went in a path that wasn't the most straightforward. But I can guarantee you there's going to be territory that I'm walking through. There's going to be country there that I'm probably going to be learning about as I'm going. And I like applying it to what we're doing here. This is how we want to frame things, as not being failures, but as catches, right? It might not be the direction that you originally wanted to go, but I guarantee you're still learning things along that way. I bet you before AI really blew up, you guys were probably still pretty active on Google doing searches. Things would probably come up and you're like, I want to know more about this, right? Google it up there. I want to know more about this. Google it up there. I think what AI amplifies, though, is those rabbit holes that you can sometimes go to. We've all been on the rabbit holes on Facebook when you scroll and you click on something. And eventually, if you do it long enough, you end up somewhere completely, totally different from where you ended up starting. The same trick or stumbling can actually happen when you're with AI as well, where you might start with one primary question and then it leads to another, leads to another, leads to another, leads to another, because of how AI is outputting and prompting back to you. And then you end up in a place where you're like, man, okay, well, I learned some stuff, but I'm so far off from where I originally wanted to go. So you still learn things, but you didn't decisively pick up any new leads on how to solve your problem that you were originally going for, right?
I agree. And I noticed too for myself, when I'm, for example, let's say watching a YouTube tutorial, which I was more likely to do than actually Googling something before AI was a thing. That was like, for some reason, my go-to. I'm like interacting and learning from a human being. I can see them and get the intangible information from them as well, and maybe build some trust. While watching a YouTube video tutorial, I always knew I didn't have to understand 90% of it. Just take the 10% of it that I understand and start doing. And that's akin to you walking the path and figuring stuff out, right? You could technically walk down the path a little too far, and that's not where you intended to go, which is going down a rabbit hole. You could walk somewhere that's dangerous or like irreversible. And I think people fear that as well. I know I did. I just keep the steps small, like keep the build small when I'm learning. And that really helped me out a lot. And with rabbit holes, that one I haven't figured out yet, but I think Tim's right. If you take these little steps forward, I'm analyzing a lot more, and I'm using AI to analyze and kind of stress test my ideas, and that really helps. So I'll take that small step forward and analyze. And if it's about measuring too, and I measure results. And if I'm getting something, then I feel like I'm not going down a rabbit hole. If I don't, then it's time, as Tim said, to kind of peel back to just an earlier step and maybe fork off into another direction.
Yeah. One thing I definitely do on my side, getting to the question again, to test my judgment, is I have biases detectors that I've built in to my workspace as well to challenge me against my thinking. I never want to lean so skewed to one side. I want to try to be open-minded on everything, even the things that are near and dear to my heart. I still never want to be so closed off in my thinking that I can't be challenged, right? I believe in the principle that we have to have a defense for our beliefs, a defense for our faith, or whatever it may be. So the best way for me to build on that, is to be aware of my biases that might potentially lay there, have them pushed back and challenged against me on the other side as well. And I think it's important from the AI perspective. I think it's important for the AI to also have that context of you, specifically in this case of me, that I want to be challenged on these pieces, to have that open frame of mind, right?
I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Judgments are necessary to take action in the world. You need to have them. You're talking about biases, and none of us are perfect, so we all have skewed perception, and I get it there. How do you measure whether your biases are a good judgment call or not? Because you're having AI take a look at you as an outside observer and say, hey, you might be biased here, and then you're obviously keeping the judgment with yourself. You wouldn't like just outsource your thinking to AI. AI said I'm biased, I'm going to do it. So like, what's the thought process there? You kind of have to pick one avenue or another, context. As I remember about 5 years ago, I was taking this training with Tim, actually. It was HR training. And they were introducing biases. And the example that they gave is they basically said, shut your eyes and picture a basketball player. And my pushback was, I obviously pictured the same thing that everybody pictures, if they're being honest, a 6'7" athletic young black guy, because they're dominating the NBA for decades now. So, you pick your best version, because if let's say my goal was to build a basketball team, that would be, according to HR, like a biased point of view. And then the picture, they were like, open your eyes. And do you remember the picture that we got, Tim?
I do.
Can you describe the picture, please?
I don't remember it in that much. But I remember the subject was, I think, a disabled, short Asian woman, I believe, was the subject. Yeah.
And then my pushback was, obviously you need to make judgments to take action in the world. And my action was along the lines of performance, right? So who am I going to picture as a basketball player? The best basketball players in the world. It's not that I value that tall, athletic, young black man more as a human being than the Asian girl. I give the same value as a human being. And in my actions, I treat them all very respectfully and with value. But the pushback for me was the point that they were trying to make is, I didn't picture that girl, I'm biased. And I think that that's completely wrong. And it really depends on what goal you're trying to achieve. And it's convoluting two ideas. One is like value as a human being versus that goal that you're trying to achieve with having to make judgment calls. And so I'm curious, how do you've set AI up to kind of stress test your biases. How do you wrap your head around it? Because you have to give AI good instruction or it's going to give you slop.
Yeah. And I think there's always an internal lever that's there that is reliant on you to actually actively pull too. Just because I have a biases detector that might push back against my thinking doesn't mean I automatically follow the framework of what it's pushing back to me. Just in what you actually stated. I love that example that you talked about with the basketball player, because I wouldn't call that a biases, or certainly if it is, I wouldn't call it a negative biases, because the odds show a certain mainstream number in that example of individuals being of a certain class, certain style, certain look, all this kind of stuff. That's just the way the average numbers actually roll out. It doesn't mean it's not the only story though, right? But just because if someone frames it, and I think that's a very weak question too, quite frankly, and that biases questions that you were asked. But if let's just say, I don't know the numbers right now, but if 80% of all the basketball players in the world fall into that category, if it's even 51%, it's a majority that are falling into it. It doesn't create a biases, in my opinion, just because that's the first image that comes to your mind when you're thinking about it. It doesn't necessarily have to be the only. If that's the only thing that you can ever think of, then maybe that's another discussion, right? Because there's, the WNBA, there's disabled basketball players. There's all these, basketball players do come in different types and styles. I was watching, I like the Wrexham show that they have on Disney, right? Welcome to Wrexham. And last year, one of the features that they had was wheelchair football for, 80% of the world. We call it football, not soccer. But that's a fight for a whole other day. But it was really interesting. When I look at the game, though, of watching it, how they're playing, because they're literally in motorized wheelchairs that are designed to actually take impact and everything like that. I look at that, I'm like, but this isn't the game of soccer. When you say soccer, right? If you say football, European football, and you close your eyes and you're asked that question, what's the first thing you think of? Probably a very green pitch, goalpost on one side, goalpost on the other. You got your half line, all that kind of stuff. And you got players running around kicking the ball. Does that make it biased? No, because that's like professional or, European style football. It doesn't negate the fact that there are lots of individuals, my daughter included, who plays challenger baseball because of her disability. It doesn't mean she's like less of a baseball, but she's never going to be a professional baseball player in the MLB or anything like that. Cards aren't there. She's in that minority. She's not in the majority of what you think of when you think of professional hockey player, professional baseball player. So maybe the question is that really a biases there? Or is you're just talking about the majorities?
I think it's probably, if you don't mind, Tim, fair to say, I think it's fair to say that their goal was different. Their goal was accessibility for all, right? For sure. And hey, that's fair if that's their goal. And my goal going into it was to probably build the highest performing team. It was leadership and high performance training, right? Yeah. And it has nothing to do with the skin color of the guy. I just would have never pictured the best basketball team. If you gave me a narrower goal, which is to include every single person on that basketball team, and that's the goal, it's not to win or be high performing, I would have been different. What's interesting is that the goal was different. And also what's interesting to me is that you use AI as a mental sparring partner, right? Yes. You're going back and forth. You don't just adopt or accept everything. And it makes my ideas better. I'm not saying that I had the best response or the best ideas in the world in that situation. I just wanted to spar back and forth so that the best ideas would float to the surface. And nobody said anything, by the way. 5 years ago, I was the only one saying something. Everybody, including Tim.
Well,
probably for the best.
Funny story. I'm going to play devil's advocate to this and try to argue what I think the point of that should have been. I don't think it was done well when it was presented. I don't think that the instructor totally understood what that was. And I'm not going to get more specific than that, but I think what the point of that exercise was not to call people out for being racist. I think it was to call people out not call people out. It was to showcase that your brain skips steps sometimes. So I think everyone would like to believe that they're a master of their own mind and they're a master of their own workflows and logic and all that stuff. But there are things that are happening behind the scenes that you don't fully understand. You don't understand why you get angry when certain things happen or why you feel emotional when other things happen, or there certain people have triggers, certain people have things that they don't understand, but you can see the output, you can see the next step. And I think that example was just showcasing that your brain skips steps sometimes. So instead of your brain taking all of the steps to reach a 6'7" African, American basketball player, you go right there because your brain has already attributed certain goals or certain things or whatever, and you just go right there because it's more efficient to get there in one step than to get there in the 10 steps it takes to actually like filter all that out in your head. And I think the whole thing, the point was just to show you that your brain skips steps sometimes. And that unchecked is dangerous because it's not necessarily about the race or about who they are or if they're disabled or not, but it's what other logical steps are you taking in the background that you're not aware of that could be affecting the way that you're building arguments or the way that you're building goals for yourself, right? Do you get where I'm coming from? Does this make sense?
I get what you're coming from, and I'd love for you to frame it from because you hit a really solid point there. Your brain skips steps. And how
Yes.
does that impact from an AI usage? Because that going back to that question, replacement of thinking.
Yep.
thinking.
And I think this is like one of the things that I use AI for, not necessarily a bias detector, but I want it to poke holes in what I'm thinking. I want it to call out the assumed steps or the jumps that I've made, not necessarily so I could feel good about myself about being a accessible and inclusive person, but just so that I can see it, just so that I can see. And I have this thing on I think the Copilot, my instructions, where it'll tell me if I've made an assumption somewhere. So like if I ask it to do something, it has this little thing at the end, and it always just says the assumptions you made are X, Y, and Z. Like you've made an assumption that this is the best choice of doing this, or this is how it works, or whatever. And some of the times I don't agree with those assumptions, but it's ones that I've made implied in the ask that I've asked AI.
Yeah. And that's the part where you're always in charge. It's that internal lever. It can push back on you, but ultimately you have the internal lever to, sorry if that popped up. But you ultimately have the internal lever to choose, do I follow the flow of what this pushback is, or do I still stand the ground of what I actually believe here? Right. But a lot of people don't even test their thinking that way.
And I think the important part in this conversation is do you actually have access to that lever? And AI is a good way to get access to it. It's a good way to poke holes, but it's also just like thinking about why you're making decisions that you're making, or why you have feelings certain ways, right? Like a lot of people do not have access to that lever. I had a friend of mine in high school had severe anger issues. He did not have access to that lever. There was nothing you could do. If certain things happened, the dude was smashing walls and he was like the Hulk. He did not have access. He has since gained access to that lever and can calm himself down and understands where some of that anger comes from, but he didn't back then. And I think that's the comparison I'm trying to make. And I'm not necessarily saying that everyone who pictures a 6'7" African male is the Hulk and they deserve to have an inhibitor on the back of their neck. But it's more so, it's just, are you aware of the steps your brain is doing in the background because of environments or things that have happened, experiences that have happened in your past? And if you're aware of it, is it at the front of your brain? Can you see it? Or is it muddy and fuzzy and you're not really sure why? And I think the way that I heard you talking about this situation, Costa, this training, you're pretty aware of how you got you can clearly explain how you got to the 6'7" African male. It wasn't like I pictured a black guy and I don't know why, right? Like it was like, why. I'm building a high performing team. I'm thinking of the highest performing people in this sport. I'm thinking of like the most common, statistically speaking. You can see how you got. Yeah. So for you, that exercise was pointless because you can clearly tell how you're getting there. And I think, and I'm not saying that you clearly tell everything that you're doing and you don't have, assumed processes in your brain that are going behind the door, but I think that the point of that exercise was to showcase some people, which could be the spark of their own autodidact journey. Something is happening in my brain that I don't know it's happening, right? Not even I don't have control over. I don't even know it's happening. It just happens and I'm making decisions. Why do you actually, just here's another thing. Costa, what is your favorite kind of drink to drink that's not water?
An Arnold Palmer.
An Arnold Palmer.
Palmy. Yeah.
Why?
I like the taste.
Why?
I don't know. It's mostly, probably, as far as I can tell, genetic proclivity.
Maybe, right? Yeah. Maybe you tasted it sometime that you don't remember and you had an experience that you tied it to, right? Like I'm not even saying that's the case, but there are things that like we have preferences on how we think about things or how we decide to do things that I know we can't understand, right? Like it's crazy to me that my favorite thing to drink is, A&W root beer is like my favorite drink other than water, and I don't know why. I like the taste, but there's like a billion tastes. Like what are the chances that A&W root beer is the best tasting drink to my taste buds? Like I've tasted like 1,000 drinks, right? I have a feeling like there is something in my past or something in my experience that has connected something in my brain to the taste of A&W, and that's the reason that I have that preference. And I don't know it. Like, I can't see it. And for me, that's proof enough that our brain does a lot of stuff behind the scenes. And when you are trying to understand your own ability to think through things or judge things or understand things, then I'm not saying you have to be fully in control of everything your brain is doing, but the more that you can see, right? The more that you can see those steps is you can identify them, and you can at least kind of like the more visibility you have around those steps when you're taking them with your own brain is my 2 cents on the matter.
Interesting.
And my devil's advocate argument.
Can I just add something onto that? Is just the way that I use AI to seek out truth, I suppose. I would just add one more idea to this, and I would venture a guess that I stress test my ideas probably above average. Like I use a lot of different stress tests against what other people think, against first principles. I iterate probably 20 times before I put something out in public, which is probably like 10 times more than a reasonable person.
20 times
more
than the
average. Yeah, that's right. However, I would say also that despite that, it's a race to action for me. And I talk about this all the time. And it's a race to action so that I can measure whatever I build out in the real world. And the measure can come in many forms, but it's necessary to improve my judgment is what's happening when I put something out into the real world that I build or I say or I do. And then my judgment becomes better based on measurements. And AI has really helped me pull measurements, think about how I'm going to measure. It definitely helps me in the doing. So like especially menial stuff that takes a long time. And therefore my experience becomes faster and faster and faster. And my measurements become faster. And so my judgment improves faster. And that's one way to like 10x or amplify your learning speed with AI.
I thought, Tim, you made an interesting point back there where you were talking about your friend who had dealt with the anger issue and he's able to recognize things now to kind of like not smash up walls and things like that. That obviously shows behavioral change in some capacity. So what actually converts knowledge into sustained behavioral change when we're talking about content consumption and actively putting it into practicum?
But I think it comes from understanding and application and the output or results of that application. And I think Kosta talks about this. I think that the change comes from understanding the change or the new state or the current state and how they connect, and then applying the change and seeing the benefit or output of that change, understanding that this is a good thing or a step in the right direction, and then that's usually enough to keep it going for me anyway. What do you think, Kosta?
And I don't think there's a map for using AI to learn. That's one that we're trying to build and discover. So, big caveat at the beginning there. But I think a couple of things. AI really multiplies skill or amplifies it. It can't create it. So really your job is like personal growth and working on yourself. And I don't have difficulty anymore applying it to practically trying something or doing something. And I think that's really a difficult thing for people is how do I jump into it? And for me, it was definitely like judgment of others or me wanting to look a specific way versus actually being a specific way. I really think it's emotional blockers that stop people from starting most of the time, or I'd say like 99% of the time. It's not actually knowing what the first step to take is. And a lot of the time it is trying to figure out all 20 steps to get from the starting line to the finish line and get the outcome that you want. And it just doesn't work that way. So really the answer to me is just reframing. And we talk about this a lot. It's not failure, it's learning. We have just so many reframes from it because I think it's an emotional mountain to climb, really.
I have a question. Do you think, if I can like create kind of an analogy for it, that there's like a perfect shape of like a change of behavior and you have to reframe the learning or the new information to fit that shape so that it doesn't cause friction with like our internal psyche? Is that kind of like a very oversimplified version of what you're saying?
I think a perspective shift is the only way to change behavior, an internal perspective shift.
So just using that kind of like terminology there, do you think that that's kind of like a simplified version of this? It's like we have to fit we have to reframe the idea or perspective into a way that fits within the person that we're trying to change without causing friction?
I don't think it's that.
Okay. Can you adjust it so that it's accurate?
I don't think it's fit. It's not like finding an outfit that fits the person. It's more like it's like a slap in the face. It's painful. It's it doesn't fit. Otherwise you would have it's not comfortable, or you would have put that on already. But it's something that's really wrapped up in what we would consider pain. There's so many analogies about growing and growing pains, and that it's uncomfortable at the very least. Yeah. And it just like anything else, if we take any analogy, but the one that pops into my head is working with your hands, and your skin is like delicate at first, and then you just build rough skin and calluses, and it just doesn't bother you anymore. I've had manual labor jobs where I literally stopped wearing gloves, and I could pick up a blazing hot frying pan like this, not feel it, put it in the sink, not get bubbles on my hand. Like I had so many extra layers of skin, and that comes from doing as well. So like I'm a big proponent of taking action and doing. Because whatever hurts you now, you're just going to it's just going to be a nothing burger eventually, right? You just get used to it and go through the things that were difficult when you were, a teenager just entering the adult world. You laugh at now. You laugh at it.
I think that's great. It's like picture the biggest problem in your life like 15 years ago. For me, it was like picture the biggest problem in your life before I had kids, and it just like nothing even like it like doesn't even register, right? Like it's not even on the same scale of like the things that are my biggest problems now, or at least the things on my mind or the things that I worry about. So it's a very interesting point, and it definitely does not go with the analogy I'm trying to make. But I think the thing that I would say is there something that you can do and that AI can help you do that to like make your skin tougher? You know what I mean? Like if learning is a slap in the face, how do you strengthen yourself so that slap in the face doesn't send you flying back and you can just kind of shrug it off? What do you think about that?
But we love that do the do quote. You just got to do the do. Because you need to take that step. Like we're talking about behavior change right here, right? Behavior change does not come overnight. Change does not come overnight. I had a great conversation with my nephew this weekend. He's a U.S. Marine, and he was just talking about being on like a 30K huck run, walk, march, whatever, and it was wet, and their socks all got wet, and he's never seen his feet that bad. Because they got so wrecked. He had blisters all over his feet and everything like that. And he's talking about now how he's looking at his feet and he's gotten through the worst of it. And, he's developed these like crazy calluses all on his feet. And I was just thinking about that thing you said of like what used to be challenging, 15 years ago to us, like isn't even remotely in the same ballpark. Right. And I'm looking at him, this young, like 19, 20-year-old who's going through this stuff. Like, and he was honest with me, and he was like, we were talking about what he loves and what he doesn't. He was like 80% of what they do he hates. It sucks because it's just physical. You're just dragged through. You have to you're up until like 3 a.m. You get back to your barracks. You fall asleep at 3:30 and you're back up at 5 because you're starting PT. And he's just like, just your body is just like physically just exhausted all the time. But 20% of the time he loves it, right? But it's that like 80% that really sucks sometimes that delivers the good results, right? We use the same analogy when we're talking about just like PT or just like physical training, right? What's the worst time for anyone when they start working out? It's those first 2 weeks. It sucks because it's not just like a mental thing. There is a neurological thing. There's a physical thing. There's so much that's actually happening to you as you're going through that process. Right? It's not just like this easy if I just take a step forward. There's all these things that are going to be like firing and changing and all this kind of stuff.
Yep.
And it's the same thing that you're talking about when you're talking about developing new behaviors around AI. AI can be this like great tutor. AI can be this great thing to help you take that step, right? You might not know the first step, but it can help you kind of find like, what is my first step? But if you can't just take that first action of, I just need to do something, I need to do the do, then you're never going to change. You're never going to develop new habits. You're never going to learn new things. The action is always the first step. Everything else follows from just that action. What that action is, we might not necessarily always land on the same point, but you have to take the action. You have to take that first step, whether it's the right direction or the wrong direction, right? There is no wrong direction because it's still a direction. You've gone somewhere.
If we say that a change of behavior is kind of like a slap in the face, and you can use AI to kind of like highlight things, have either of you been slapped in the face by AI?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you remember a specific? Do you remember a specific situation that you would like to share with the class?
I definitely have. And it came in terms of prioritization, what was important to get done versus busy work that made me feel good. And it was something that I was avoiding because of discomfort or putting myself out there for being vulnerable. And I just did like a quick AI analysis of my priorities. And it said, you keep saying you want to do this, but your actions don't match the outcome that you want. So you have to decide to get serious about doing these things and be vulnerable or keep doing busy. And I was like, oh shit,
Yeah.
what am I doing?
Mine was I kept talking to Copilot, and I kept talking in meetings about automations and creating workflows and all that stuff. And then the slap in the face came when I just, people share prompts, and the prompt was like, go over my chat history and like tell me my blind spots and all that stuff, right? And it gave me you talk a lot about creating workflows and automations and have done nothing to actually create any of them. And like 90% of your chat is like, tweaking or busy work or just like analyzing stuff. So it's like you talk about these big ideas, but you're not actually doing anything to like achieve them, which is very similar to yours, Kosta. And it was slap in the face. And I was mad. I threw my computer across the room. Just kidding. I don't have an anger issue. Justin?
Yeah, I think mine is, I've done this a couple of times, but when I've built out automations using AI, and it's certainly like an educational piece, but because of those rabbit holes, sometimes it leads you to something at the end where I'm literally like, I look back at it and I would frame it always as, this is the importance of human judgment. When I first started building automations, whatever the output from the AI was, I would just kind of follow suit. I'd be like, yeah, okay, let's do that. Okay, yep, let's do that. Yep, let's do that. And then I'd get to the end and it was utter DS. It was complete just garbage, right? It was complete garbage. And what I had actually done is I checked my brain at the door, right? Mm-hmm. And I just been like, hey, you can handle this. I'm going to trust you with this piece. And it didn't, because it doesn't have that ability to replace the human judgment right now. And I knew what I wanted. I knew the steps that I needed to be taking. And instead of following my instinct on certain things and giving pushback, I just kind of allowed it to dictate the way the conversation was going, the way the build was going. And it ended with this utter piece of crap that I still look at and I'm like, okay, because there's still a learning there, right? There's, as we frame it now, it wasn't a failure. There was lots of catches that I actually picked up in that process, but definitely just kind of checking my brain at the door and allowing it was a huge slap in the face, because it's not built that. And I think a lot of that came too with just one way I'd frame it is the naivete around thinking of AI as this kind of like, it's got all the answers. It doesn't, FYI. And B, there's also something just with the capabilities of AI when I started doing automations like that, right? It gets better and better. And there's ways, those gaps that you've seen even like 3 months ago are starting to be filled in by the new iterations that are actually being produced. But it's still far, far away from being able to replace humans in their judgment.
And just, before we kind of went on to this topic, Tim was asking something interesting that I think is pertinent right now. If you're not even getting AI to do that, or if you have some kind of emotional hurdle like fear or procrastination, starting is very often the hardest part. And if you start, sometimes you just get the ball rolling and then you start moving and you're like, oh, why didn't I start sooner? The answer to that question is just practice for the game with AI. Like before you even show up to a game, there's many reasons why sports teams practice is so that when you show up to the big game, or if you're struggling to make yourself vulnerable or, put yourself out there, or for fear of not getting an outcome that you want, just start practicing with AI, start kind of building something, sparring back and forth between you and AI, and it'll start the process of you going. After doing that for like a year, I'm shocked at kind of where I've landed. And it sounds like you guys kind of do the same thing. And then the cool thing here is that AI is really building context around me. I've had like a breakthrough today, another one, just by taking a step back and analyzing the context that AI has built around me. But just seeing how I was using AI and it building context around me more and more and more, I just took a step back and analyzed again. And that was another breakthrough that wasn't necessarily a slap in the face, but like a real, moment where I was like blown away that I've been using it differently than how I think I should use it. And then I should just go back and build around the way that I'm actually using it. Mm-hmm. And if you liked this discussion and you're a self-learner and you love AI and using AI to self-learn, we got a free community for you guys to join. Just look in the description there. We'd love to see you. We'd love to talk to you every day. We're in there every day. So hope to see you there. Thanks, Justin and Tim.
It's Kosta.
See you Friday.
Great chat.
See ya.